RFK Jr.'s confirmation hearing is happening today and tomorrow in Washington, D.C. We will play some highlights from today's hearing. And also, Donald Trump signed an executive order ending the genital mutilation of gender deceived children. This is amazing. We've got so much on today's episode of Relatable, everything that I just previewed, and so much more. Hey guys, welcome to Relatable. Happy Wednesday. Hope everyone is having a wonderful week so far. So much to talk about again today. I don't know if you saw the first ever press conference for this administration or this iteration of this administration yesterday. The press secretary, Karoline Leavitt, did an incredible job. But one of the things that she said that was maybe most exciting, at least for me, was her announcement that they will be allowing podcasters and social media influencers and independent journalists into the press room, into these press conferences. Now, I'm not excited because I am going to be there. I am just excited for this shift in authority in the media, that we no longer, and this has been this way for a while, but I think it really accelerated during the election. We no longer have to rely on the mainstream media, the corporate media, for our information. For a while, it was like, yeah, a lot of people are getting commentary from podcasts and blogs and different sources, but we have to get our official news and our political news from the mainstream. But now it's not even like that anymore. X has really changed the game, but also the landscape has just changed so much. People always ask me, did you always know that you wanted to do what you're doing? And in a way, the answer is yes, in that I've always loved communicating. I have always loved public speaking. I talk about that moment when I gave the commencement address at my college graduation, and I had what felt like this out-of-body experience where I was saying my speech and I was looking at the crowd and I just felt a resounding yes. This is professionally what I want to do with my life. But I had no idea what conservative media would look like. I knew I was a conservative. I knew I cared about politics and culture. I knew I cared about theology and somehow wedding those things. But at the time, I had no picture of what that could look like. The only idea I had of going into conservative media was maybe talk radio, but mostly like the precipice would be Fox News. And I didn't study broadcast and I had no connections in that world. And I had no idea how on earth I would make my way into that realm, knowing how competitive it was and that you really did need to get your foot in the door like right away. But I knew I loved Megyn Kelly. I mean, from an early age, I would say early high school is probably when I started watching her regularly on Fox News. And I just thought and still think that she's amazing. And I knew I wanted to do something like that. But gosh, the world just opened up so much around the time that I started doing what I do in a different way. First, most of you know my story, but I started talking to sororities when I was working full-time in PR, but I just thought, I just want to public speak so much. I just want to be in front of people. I want to talk about these things. I don't know how to do that. I started reaching out to sorority chapters because I lived in a college town, and I gave them this presentation about why they need to vote in the election. This was 2015. I started a blog called The Conservative Millennial, talking about culture and politics from a conservative Christian perspective. And then I posted on Facebook, and that kind of grew. I got connected with the Blaze in 2017 through a series of really cool and providential connections. And then I started this in 2018. And I no longer have any aspirations to be a part of corporate media because you don't have to be in order to have influence. And honestly, I have way more freedom and way more flexibility and autonomy to talk about whatever I want to talk about from whatever perspective I have than I would if I were a part of corporate media. And so I'm just so thankful for how this landscape has changed. We bemoan a lot of the changes in media, but really like the democratization of the media has been in general a really good thing. I remember learning in college, actually, in one of my communications classes, a professor who I really loved, and I think he was right at the time. But he said, if you put a sign on the window of like your apartment, more people would probably see that sign than if you started a blog and started posting, because there are so many people, not just so many people on the internet, but so much content on the internet, and it's so oversaturated. And that was one of the challenges, he said, with people trying to become the media themselves, and then the lack of, uniform accountability and fact checkers and things like that. But of course, that's exactly what's happened, is the democratization of the media. And like I said, I think it has been a huge net positive, and I'm just grateful that I've gotten to play a small part of that, and that the White House now recognizes that is going to change the game. Now, do I want Relatable to be represented in the press room one day? That would be amazing. But honestly, I would be just really happy if any of my independent colleagues or colleagues at Blaze TV get to be in that room. Like, I would feel like I am represented if I have someone who is socially conservative in other ways, a Christian, in that room asking the questions that concern us. But of course, I would love to be in there and represent the related bros and the related gals. I mean, the conservative suburban mom, we're a huge demographic, and we're a very powerful demographic. And the conservative suburban mom girlies are all watching Relatable. They're all watching Relatable. And so I'm just saying, like, if we want a representation of that very important voter block, that suburban Christian mom, then you need to let none other than the Relatable crew into the press room. But anyway, regardless of that, I am super excited for that change, and I'm excited for Karoline Leavitt. Again, she did an awesome job. The contrast between the competence of this administration and the competence of the last administration, just in the ability, literal physical ability to articulate, is astounding. Who did we have last time? Karine Jean-Pierre. Remember her? I'm sorry. A beautiful lady, maybe nice. I have no idea. But, and I'm saying this literally, I'm not trying to exaggerate or just be rude, she could not say words. I was always like, okay, of all the people that you could have picked to be in this position, you would think one qualification for this role would be that you can speak, that you can actually string together a sentence that makes sense. And she struggled so much with that, so much. And so to have someone who can just talk and who can speak well and communicate well, and who actually has access to the president, a president who is coherent, who actually has a position on things, it's really amazing. And that is how it always should be, no matter which party is in office. But it's just a breath of fresh air. So I'm so excited for so many reasons for the next 4 years. But how the media is even going to change and expand and grow over the next 4 years is exciting. And again, I'm just grateful to be a small part of that. I'm also just excited that we are just so not tired of winning yet. Are you tired of winning? I'm so not tired of winning. I feel like I just took a Red Bull and took a Red Bull. I don't think people say that. I think they say drink a Red Bull. That's what I feel like. I feel like I just had a large cold brew, and I am ready to go and win and win and win and win. And one of the wins that we just saw yesterday was from none other than President Trump. He signed an executive order protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation occurring under the guise of so-called transgender care. In his executive order, President Trump called the practice a, quote, dangerous trend that will be a stain on our nation's history. He is 100% right. So chemical, that includes cross-sex hormones and the puberty blockers that are rendering young people infertile across the country because they are deceived about their gender. So here's what he posted on Truth Social. He said, "Today it was my great honor to sign an executive order banning the chemical castration and medical mutilation of innocent children in the United States of America. Our nation will no longer fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support so-called gender-affirming care, which has already ruined far too many precious lives. My order directs agencies to use every available means to cut off federal financial participation in institutions which seek to provide these barbaric medical procedures that should have never been allowed to take place. Here's what the executive order says. Quote, across the country today, medical professionals are maiming and sterilizing a growing number of impressionable children under the radical and false, most importantly, false claim that adults can change a child's sex, or adults can change anyone's sex, but this says child specifically, through a series of irreversible medical interventions. Countless children soon regret that they have been mutilated and begin to grasp the horrifying tragedy that they will never be able to conceive children of their own or nurture their children through breastfeeding. Moreover, these vulnerable youth's medical bills may rise throughout their lifetimes as they are often trapped with lifelong medical complications, a losing war with their own bodies, and tragically sterilization. Accordingly, it is the policy of the United States that it will not fund, sponsor, promote, assist, or support the so-called transition of a child from one sex to another, and it will rigorously enforce all laws that prohibit or limit these destructive and life-altering procedures. Like, I just want to tear up. I just want to cry. I mean, praise God. This is such a mercy to our nation. Now, we need Congress to get to legislating these executive orders because we don't want to have to rule by executive order, because it is very easy for the next president then to just implement his own executive orders when he takes office, and then we're just back and forth on that. But I just appreciate so much that he's giving us guidance and that he is acting quickly, and that we, at the very least, even if Congress won't get their act together, which is Republican controlled, like, come on, that we have a reprieve from the wickedness of the last administration, which I will contrast the policies of the last administration to this one and reiterate yet again that the choice for Christians was always really clear. Like, you were told it was nuanced and complicated and, oh my gosh, both sides are bad. And even evangelical conservative pastors were telling you that during the election. And so many of us were saying, it's really not that hard. Like, it's really not that hard. You've got one lady who believes in the taxpayer-funded transition of men into looking like women. I can't say actually into women, and transferring them into women's prisons. Like, she was a part of the administration that, as we will talk about in a minute, actually helped give the guidance for the so-called transitioning of children. I mean, you've got an administration, the past administration, who believed in the taxpayer-funded abortion of image bearers of God through all 9 months. You had an administration who undermined every effort by border states to protect their own border, who enabled and exacerbated the policies that led to the senseless, preventable murder of Laken Riley. And then you have Donald Trump, who promises to do the opposite of those things. It really was never as complicated and nuanced and difficult as you were told by your pastor. It was always really clear. We never said that either side is perfect. We never said that Donald Trump is this man of God, this perfect guy that you should emulate. We never said that. We just said, look at the policies that are actually going to affect people's lives, and one side is clearly better. One side is clearly more in alignment with Scripture, with the nature of a God of order who cares about nations and cares about our protection and cares about the most vulnerable and hates the mutilation of children's bodies, either through abortion or through so-called gender transition. It really was never that hard. And I am just so thankful that Donald Trump, through these executive orders, as we've talked about this week, as we talked about last week, that he is proving that he is making that so clear, that he is, I think, going above and beyond delivering on the promises that he made on the campaign trail. And you know, I hope that this doesn't sound like, I'm taking credit for anything that I shouldn't take credit for, because I'm totally not at all. But I would like to think that the conversations had on this show, that the bravery of some of the guests that we've had on this show, the way that not just I, but all of you in this audience have been willing to share the arrows and to raise a respectful and relentless ruckus about the things that matter on this issue in partnership with so many other people in the media, so many other advocates and activists, many who have been doing this for years longer than any of us have, that we also played a role in something like this happening. Because when I think about the line in this executive order specifically that talks about children who go through these mutilating these mutilating procedures and then are unable to have children or breastfeed, I think about at least two of the guests that we have had on the show, but specifically I think of Daisy Strongen, who of course she has shared her story far beyond this show, but I just think about the conversation that I had with her, and she transitioned as a young person. She ended up getting the double mastectomy, thinking that she would finally truly be a man through the grace of God. And she says through also listening to this podcast, she realized that no, she is not a man. She'll never be a man, that she is a woman, that God created her to be a girl. And so she detransitioned and now she has two beautiful children. And I'm so thankful for that. But she shared so transparently on X after she had her daughter, her second child, just the pain and the heartbreak of having to feed her child formula in the hospital, even though she wanted to breastfeed, but she couldn't. Because when she was very young and mentally unstable, she was given the option, I believe it was the age of 19. So she had already transitioned in other ways, but was able to surgically transition when she was just 19, cut her breasts off, and now she will never be able to breastfeed. And we have talked to so many detransitioners on this couch who have made choices, whether as young adults or even as teenagers, that have caused irreparable harm to their bodies. And I would just like to think that God has used even the conversations here, even the bravery that has been shown by so many of my guests in conjunction with all of the steps of obedience, the words of obedience of other people, both in the public and the private sphere, that God has used all of this courage to create a contagion that then built up to an executive order like this. And I just want to remind you that God never wastes your boldness in the way of truth, that God never wastes your obedience, that God never wastes your courage, that time that you spoke up, that time that you pushed back on the preferred pronoun, that time that you told the truth to someone who either believed in gender deception or was deceived about their gender themselves, that time that you shared the gospel, that time that you refused to bow down or compromise and you stood strong. I believe that all of those moments, big and small, private and public, have worked together to help create a moment where there was a demand for an executive order like this. And I just want us to recognize how big that is and how God is using an imperfect person. We're all imperfect, but it's Donald Trump. He's crass, he's got a past, he's got all of that. Like, he is using this person to make very righteous and merciful policy. And I just hope that you're able to see, even if you're on the other side of the aisle, even if you didn't vote for him. I know there are plenty of people out there listening and watching who did not vote for Donald Trump, that you're able to be thankful for that you're able to praise God for that. Okay, I've got more about this executive order in just a second. Let me go ahead and pause and tell you about our first sponsor for the day, and that is Jase Medical. Y'all, if there is some kind of emergency, whether it is some kind of economic disaster, whether it is a natural disaster, you need to make sure that you are prepared. We talk about being prepared with your food supply, but you also need to be prepared with your medical supply. Should something happen where, for whatever reason, you can't get to your doctor, you can't get to your pharmacy, you want to make sure that you've got a stash of common antibiotics for the most common infections. I mean, these can be absolutely life-saving. So you need this Jase case from Jase Medical. You'll get life-saving antibiotics for the most common infections. You can add on things like ivermectin, or an EpiPen or Tamiflu. Again, all of those can be life-changing and or life-saving rather in certain circumstances. You can also get a Jace Daily case. That is a year-long emergency supply of the medications, the prescriptions that you and your family rely on. They'll take you through their confidential telemedicine process, get you hooked up with the things that you need. Just go to jace.com. That's JASE.com. Use code Allie 10 for a discount on your order, ALLIE 10, jace.com, code Allie 10. Trump's order also directs agencies to use every available means to cut off federal financial participation in institutions which provide chemical and surgical mutilation of children. The DOJ is ordered to prioritize investigations of those who would subject young women from these barbaric acts and to investigate consumer deception and fraud. The order sets in motion congressional action to empower detransitioners to receive justice against those who so callously led them down this path. And praise God, like that is going to be the thing that ends this is lawfare. Just lawfare from these detransitioners who hire lawyers that sue the doctors. It needs to be more financially costly for a doctor to perform these surgeries than it is, costly for them to perform these surgeries than it is for them to not support these surgeries. Because a lot of this, the doctors that are a part of this, they're not really ideologically supportive of it, but they're not against it either. They're just thinking about money, which is evil. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. It's not money itself, but the love of money, the worship of money, the idolatry of money and power, and also just fear of political blowback, fear for that you might get some kind of like criticism or pushback. That leads a lot. It's really all an idolatry of self when you think about it. We've got to fear God more than we fear our fellow man. And when those things get out of whack, you make really, really bad decisions on a big and a small scale. And on a big scale, that's what we're looking at when we're looking at these doctors who consent to doing these awful genital mutilation surgeries. There was this, I just thought of this, so we don't have the video and I don't even think we would play it if we did, but I saw this awful video going around. This was literally one of the most disturbing things I've ever seen. And there's a lot of like troubling, scary, graphic, like content on X of like killing and violence and all kinds of terrible things. But this was one of the most disturbing. And this was a woman, a young woman. I'm not actually sure how young she is. I want to say like 19 or 20. And she is severely autistic and has severe cerebral palsy. She is nonverbal. And she is unable to move her body, most of her body. She's in a wheelchair, and even her arms are mostly paralyzed. She can make noises, but she is not actually able to speak. And she has been transitioned to the opposite sex, or attempted transition to the opposite sex. And what has this meant? This has meant that her parent, it looks like her mother, from some social media investigating that I've seen on X, has given her cross-sex hormones, so testosterone. And the video that I saw was post-double mastectomy. So this young woman, again, can't speak, can't move. She has scars on her chest where her breasts have been removed because her mother, who clearly has Munchausen by proxy, who just enjoys using her child as some kind of science experiment and is probably being applauded for how inclusive and empathetic she is, has forced her child into the surgery. This person, I should say, I shouldn't say child, although she probably is mentally a very young child, if not a toddler. She can't consent. She can't consent. And this is actually the problem with consent-based morality. Consent as the basis for what is right and wrong is that consent is you'll see, according to these people, or consent when it comes to people who don't really have a solid worldview, is very flexible. It's very relative. Clearly, they didn't need an actual yes. Clearly, they didn't have an objective standard of consent. Consent, if that is your only basis for morality, can really be whatever you say, which is why consent cannot be the only factor in determining if something is right and wrong. Well, if someone wants to do it, if it makes someone happy, well, that's really difficult to determine. No, we have to have a basic objective standard of truth and false and right and wrong. That's really hard to do without God, but I would be happy if we at least were going in that direction to say, okay, there is actually an objective truth. We all need to discuss and find that real fast. And that's what this executive order, I think, represents. And I would love to see it also include someone like this young woman who has been butchered without her consent. This special needs person has been butchered without her consent. I would love legal protections for her. I think that that mother should be in prison. Just to be honest, I think the doctors should be in prison. And everyone who participated in the butchering of that disabled person's body should be in prison. They call out WPATH, and we have talked about WPATH before, the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, for lacking scientific integrity. They say that WPATH is behind the guidance that tells parents their children will kill themselves if they do not obtain so-called gender-affirming care. And by the way, we've talked about many times, that is a lie. That's a lie. That's just not true. We have talked about WPATH and its corruption and its perversion many times. Genevieve Gluck is the co-founder of Redux Magazine. She worked to expose WPATH for the last 3 years plus. She was on episodes 702 and 703 of Relatable. She's very sweet. This is in my notes. It says credits Allie for being one of the very first people to take her seriously about this. And I think I just saw her on X, and I thought that what she had to say was really fascinating and disturbing when she says WPATH, again, that gives the guidance for these doctors and for the Biden administration to sign off on transitioning of children. They actually got a lot of their information on what should happen to these children from literal pedophile forums online. That's not an exaggeration. That's where they got some of their research. They talked to men that are a part of these fantasy forums where they share these forced castration fantasies with each other, and involving these like fictional young boys. Like WPATH infiltrated these forums, talked to some of these people, and got guidance for child transition from some of these people. If you think I'm exaggerating at all, then you need to go watch that episode. So she actually, I haven't even seen these posts. So she said on X last year, she said 2 years ago, I was calling for an investigation into the World Professional Association for Transgender Health based on seeing extreme castration fetish pornography content associated with the organization. And then she just said yesterday, she said, it is not enough to remove WPATH's influence from the U.S. government and medical authorities. Its leaders, sexologists mostly, must be investigated and held responsible. So thank you to Genevieve for talking about this for so long. It is my honor to have had that conversation with you and platformed that a long time ago. We really were definitely Genevieve, but in conservative media, some of the very first people talking about the dark underbelly of this industry. I just want to contrast the last administration and this administration. So under President Biden, the Health and Human Services under President Biden put out a fact sheet titled Gender Affirming Care in Young People. This is March 2022. Again, they were following WPATH, that organization that we just talked about that is so dark and demonic. The document says this: for transgender and non-binary children. Okay, this is a category of people that don't exist. But okay, for transgender and non-binary children and adolescents, early gender-affirming care is crucial to overall health and well-being, as it allows the child or adolescent to focus on social transitions and can increase their confidence while navigating the healthcare system. it's not possible to transition gender. So all you're doing is pumping hormones in a child's body that should not be there and stopping the regular puberty process that is required for them to grow mentally and physically into functioning, responsible, mentally stable adults that can one day, if they wish, have children. This is demonic beyond comprehension. So here is their guidance, the Biden administration guidance, his HHS. Talks about the affirming care that these kids who think that they're the opposite gender need. Social affirmation, so adopting gender-affirming hairstyles, clothing, name, gender pronouns, restrooms, and other facilities. So boys and girls restrooms. Puberty blockers, using certain types of hormones to pause pubertal development. They say this is reversible. It's not completely reversible. Hormone therapy, testosterone hormones for those who were assigned female at birth, estrogen for those assigned male at birth. Just this absolutely Orwellian language. They say that this is partially reversible and that this should be done in early adolescence onward. Gender-affirming surgeries, top surgery to create male typical chest, bottom surgery, surgery on genitals or reproductive organs. They say this is typically in adulthood, used in adulthood. This is not even guidance. It's really interesting that they say typically used in adulthood or case by case in adolescence. That's the Biden administration. That's who a lot of people said, oh, well, maybe we should vote for the woman who was a part of that. I posted yesterday, Biden promoted the genital mutilation of gender-confused kids. Trump just banned it. Biden prosecuted pro-life protesters. Trump pardoned them. Biden harbored violent illegal aliens. Trump's deporting them. The debate over which side Christians should be on really isn't hard and never was. Abigail Shrier, who has been such an influential voice in all of this, I am so grateful for her courage that she has shown for so many years and really just led the charge on so many of these conversations outside of conservative circles too, which is really unique and helpful. She says she's the author of Irreversible Damage and Bad Therapy. She's been on a few times. She said 15 years of unconscionable madness ends today, hopefully forever. Matt Walsh, another person who has been so crucial in this fight. He said that it's spectacular, this executive order, and I'm so grateful for that. I just did want to give a really short update on this subject. It has to do with the subject. Dr. Eithan Haim. We talked to Vanessa Sivage. You'll remember she won the Share the Arrows Award at our event. She was a fellow whistleblower of his at Texas Children's Hospital. He was the doctor who blew the whistle on the illegal gender transitions and puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones that were being given to children at the country's largest children's hospital down in Houston. And we also talked to his wife a couple months ago. She was just a couple months postpartum, and she was dealing with this case because he was being targeted by the FBI and the DOJ, and the judge in the case gave him a gag order that said, you cannot talk about your case. And so his wife was brave enough to come on the show and to talk about that gag order. But last Friday, a judge dismissed the case against Dr. Haim. And so now he's done with that nightmare. He was potentially facing a decade in prison. They said that he violated HIPAA laws by being a whistleblower, but he didn't. Go back and listen to those episodes. It'll give you a lot of details. He didn't give details about any patients. He just said, hey, this is happening. And there are protections for whistleblowers, by the way. And it was illegal in the state of Texas, is illegal in the state of Texas. And so it wasn't just that he didn't like it. It was illegally happening. He was also facing up to $250,000 in fines after he leaked documents to Christopher Rufo. But it's done. Isn't that interesting? Just a shift in power has changed so much for so many people. Injustices are being made right. And again, I just keep thinking of the word mercy. And I'm so thankful for that. And speaking of a shift in power and the change of guards happening in Washington, D.C., RFK right now is going through his confirmation hearings before the Senate Finance Committee to testify regarding his nomination to serve as Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services. Now, you'll remember what I just read to you, right? the guidance that HHS gave when it came to the genital mutilation of children. So that is who RFK, that's the department that RFK is now going to be over. And the same people, many, not all, but many of the same people, at least the people on the left who say RFK is unqualified, he's so dangerous, they had no problem with that. They had no problem with that guidance. They had no problem with this person. We'll put up a picture of sweet, sweet, sweet Rachel Levine, our dainty princess. Sorry, I don't use wrong pronouns. He was the assistant secretary of the HHS, the picture of health. I mean, this is the man who was helping give the guidance for the genital mutilation of children. Don't tell me to be nice. I'm not going to be nice. First of all, this person isn't healthy in any regard, mentally or physically. So what are they even doing in the HHS? But also someone who believes the delusion that they are the opposite sex not only shouldn't be in the HHS, but also definitely shouldn't be giving guidance for children, changing their hormones and being made irreparably infertile. So if you didn't have a problem with that, if you didn't have a problem with that person, and as we'll talk about in a minute, Xavier Becerra, who is very evil, if you didn't have a problem with them being the head of the HHS, I don't really care what you have to say about RFK. I mean, honestly, like we could put Lamb Chop to be the head of the HHS, and I would say that's better than who the Biden administration had. So a little bit more about what's going on with RFK right now. He will appear before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, the HELP Committee, tomorrow for the same purpose. While RFK Jr. appears to have a wide base of support from many independents and Republicans in the Make America Healthy Again movement, he is also the target of much opposition, including from his own family and former Vice President Mike Pence. Dun, dun, dun. He would be in charge of huge agencies such as the CDC, the FDA, the NIH, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. So let me just show you the support that he is getting right now. There's a crowd in line this was this morning, in line for the RFK confirmation. Mostly, I'm assuming to show him support. I'm sure there are plenty of people there who are haters, but there's a lot of support for him. Here's top 4.
These people are all here to make America healthy again. And there's a line upstairs. We are hopeful that we will get into the room. They got a big room. Woohoo!
That's a lot of people. So he gave an opening statement where he promised to make sure that American tax dollars go toward healthy foods and to create an HHS that is accountable to the president and to the American people. That's great. It's like, duh. He also stated that people should be allowed to eat what they want because some people are like, oh, he's going to take away my McDonald's. You know what? I'm going to take away your McDonald's. You shouldn't be eating McDonald's. He's going to take away your McDonald's cheeseburgers, which he says his boss loves, LOL, Diet Coke, and Twinkies, but that people should know what the impact on their health would be. Yeah, here's that one.
If you like a McDonald's cheeseburger or Diet Coke, which my boss loves, and you should be able to get them. If you want to eat Hostess Twinkies, you should be able to do that, but you should know what the impacts are on your family and on your health.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Here's another part of his opening statement, thought 2.
And the first thing I've done every morning for the past 20 years is to get on my knees and pray to God that he would put me in a position to end the chronic disease epidemic and to help America's children.
Well, we should certainly be praying to that end too, and we should be praying for him. I don't know exactly where his faith is. I mean, the Kennedys have been Catholic for a very long time. I don't know where his personal faith is, but we certainly should be praying for him. I think there's a lot of people in the Make America Healthy Again movement that have seen the light in many areas, but I am also seeing a change in spirit in a lot of them. As they wake up to the lies of progressivism in general, they're realizing that the really big lie from which all the other lies come is that you are your own God. And once you realize that that's not true, that there is a higher power, and that higher power is recognized in our founding documents, which has done everything to make America great when it has been great, you start to ask some really good questions. I know a lot of people who are starting to read the Bible for the first time this year, and I pray that that is also true of RFK. We know that he's going to get a ton of pushback, especially when it comes to his stance on vaccines. And here's one example of that. Here's SOT 3.
Are you lying to Congress today when you say you are pro-vaccine? Or did you lie on all those podcasts? We have all of this on tape, by the way.
Yeah, Senator, as you know, because it's been repeatedly debunked, that statement that I made on the Lex Friedman podcast was a fragment of the statement. And I said there are no vaccines that are safe and effective, and I was going to continue for every person. I've corrected it many times, including on national TV. You know about this, Senator Wyden, so bringing this up right now is dishonest.
And you know who else has said that before? That there is no vaccine that is fully safe or effective for every single person. You know who else has said that on this podcast? Paul Offit. I had Paul Offit on this show several years ago. I'm not sure that I would have him back, although it was an interesting conversation. And I had Bob Sears on the podcast too. So relatable. Talking about the controversial topics a long time ago. It was probably 5+ years ago. I think I was pregnant with my first at the time. And Paul Offit said, which this is an honest statement, and I appreciate that no, he cannot say that every vaccine is safe because, of course, nothing that you put in your body is the same level of safeness for every single person. So even if you just concede that reality that even Paul Offit, which is he's part of the development of many vaccines, and he is hugely pro-vaccination in general. Like, if we can concede that, then we can also concede that there should be more accountability and more transparency and more autonomy by parents when it comes to vaccines, right? And it seems to me like that's what RFK stands for. It should also be noted that Senator Wyden's campaign collected nearly $1.5 million from health professionals, hospitals, health services organizations, and pharmaceutical companies, including AbbVie, Merck, Pfizer. They're among the companies whose PACs have given significant amounts, with Wyden receiving over $700,000 from the pharmaceutical industry between 2013 and 2018. But I'm sure that's totally irrelevant here. I'm sure that has nothing to do with his questioning of Kennedy. So how is this going to go? This is according to Time. Kennedy can only afford to lose 3 Senate Republican votes if Democrats unanimously oppose his nomination. According to Time's reporting yesterday, it's currently unclear whether any Republicans will vote against him. However, Senator Roger Marshall said on Fox News that he believes there are enough votes to confirm all Trump nominees, including RFK Jr. and Tulsi Gabbard. That's another one that's kind of like hanging in the balance. Some Republicans, such as Senator Josh Hawley, are demanding that Kennedy clarify his past support for abortion rights, given that he would play a key role in shaping the Trump administration's abortion policies. And I think that is totally fair. I think that is a completely fair question. And RFK responded to this concern because it's a concern that I have too. And I'm glad that he is at least owning up to this. Here's SOT 12.
For President Trump's policies on Title X, I agree with President Trump that every abortion is a tragedy. I agree with him that we cannot be a moral nation if we have 1.2 million abortions a year. I agree with him that the states should control abortion. President Trump has told me that he wants to end late-term abortions, and he wants to protect conscience exemptions, and that he wants to end federal funding for abortions here or abroad. That's Title X. I serve at the pleasure of the president. I'm going to implement his policies.
Thank you for that.
Okay, and I appreciate that. We just have to keep our eye on that. And we have to make sure that That is true. What else is he going to champion as the head of the HHS? Kennedy founded, if we look at his past, we can get some answers on that. Founded the Children's Health Defense in 2018. It's an advocacy group whose mission is ending childhood health epidemics by eliminating toxic exposure, holding responsible parties accountable, and establishing safeguards to prevent future harm of children's health. And he's talked a lot about the decline of children's health. We've talked about on this podcast with Casey Means, for example, just the obesity epidemic and the allergy epidemic, the autism epidemic. And that's not to say that autism is, I'm not even making any claims about what autism is caused by, but I do think that it is worth asking why there has been a boom in that diagnosis over the past 20 years. Are environmental factors playing a role in that? Certainly, I think it's worth asking, and he is going to spearhead research into that. Kennedy's organization, the Children's Health Defense, said that the only way to stop these troubling health trends is by investigating all possible causes, even if it means re-examining what has ironically been considered, quote, settled science in mainstream medicine. When it comes to vaccines, Kennedy said that if he were to join the Trump administration, he would want to examine government vaccine safety data and share his findings with the public. He has confirmed his stance. Again, we already saw this. He's not anti-vax. He wouldn't ban vaccines. He said if vaccines are working for someone, I'm not going to take them away, but people should have the choice. And that choice ought to be informed by the best information. And I just appreciate that so much. I don't know if I've ever talked about this, but I started having some questions for my pediatrician when my oldest was a baby, and it just seemed like a lot. It just seemed like a lot at once when they're really little. And so I had some questions, especially as a new mom, and I was anxious about so many things, and I just wanted to do the right thing. And this was pre-COVID, so I didn't have suspicions necessarily based on things that I knew that the CDC was doing or anything like that. I know a lot of you have had your suspicions well before COVID, but for me, like a lot of people, it was COVID that started making me ask even more questions. But I was just curious before all of that, like, where do we get the science for the schedule? And this is so much more than when I was a baby. And like, what's the reason for that? And is it okay to space them out? I just wanted to know. And I felt completely shut down by my pediatrician. First of all, I didn't get any answers. And when I started to ask about, okay, well, what about this kind of adjusted schedule or something like that? I was told, as long as you know that there's no science backing your position. As long as you know that there's no medical necessity behind what you might choose to do, as long as you know there's no foundation to your concerns or your curiosities. And then the more I pushed, the more I felt like I couldn't. And it came to the point where I would not go to a pediatrician appointment without my husband because I felt like I was being made to feel stupid just for asking things. And if anything causes skepticism, it is being made to feel like you cannot ask a question. It is being made to feel like the person who is supposed to be the expert isn't willing to answer you. It doesn't have the answers. Who are we supposed to go to if not the doctors? Or at least that's how you feel. And now I think there are a lot more options for people to actually read like the pamphlets and the ingredients and to really understand vaccines and like what's right for your specific child and all of that stuff. I think there's more information now and more transparency than there was a few years ago. But a lot of parents go through this bullying in the doctor's office. And if RFK, being the head of the HHS, at least changes that, like gives parents more information and more power and changes the culture so that maybe doctors don't feel like they have to be so defensive, that because doctors really don't spend a lot of time in med school learning about vaccines, but they should. They should know everything about them. They should know the benefits. They should know the risks. They should know the ingredients. They should be able to answer questions in a very cheery and helpful way. That should be the norm. And I'm not saying that RFK has the power to change all of that as one individual, but I do think he has a lot of it. And I think no matter where you stand on vaccines, that would be a benefit for everyone. And a lot of people also want more information about vaccine injuries, which are not fake. Tucker Carlson has talked very openly that one of his children had a vaccine injury. I believe it was from the flu vaccine. I know people who have been vaccine injured. That's not something that I've experienced or anyone in my family that I know of has experienced, but I do know people who have been vaccine injured. And I do appreciate, and what a lot of people appreciate about RFK is that not only has he never shamed that as someone who seems to care a lot about science, but he has also given a voice to those moms who have said, no one's listening to us. But if you care about the environment and you care about toxins affecting children, then will you listen to us when we say we think that our children have had an adverse reaction to these vaccines? And can we get some accountability? Can these pharmaceutical companies please be held accountable in some way? Can we have some freedom? Can we have some information and transparency and truly have informed consent? And that has really motivated a lot of what RFK has done. And that is why so many people support him. The support for RFK it's not a bunch of like fear-mongering conspiracy theorists. Not everyone who supports RFK is completely 100% anti-vax. They just appreciate that he has listened to their concerns, validated their concerns, and they're hoping for some more transparency when it comes to our healthcare industry. And I think that we would all like to see doctors who actually know about health and who know about the whole body. We also talked about that with Dr. Casey Means, that so many doctors today really don't know how the entire body functions and how one part of the body affects the other part of the body and the holistic options to help people be healthy. They just learn, here's what I'm supposed to prescribe you, here's the therapeutic, and here's what's going to take away your symptoms. Again, is RFK going to change all of that? I don't know, but I think it's a really good start. And so if he is focusing on what's in our food, what's in the ingredients that we have not only in our food, but also in our medications, in our vaccines, and he is pushing for transparency, accountability, and safety and holistic health, and he is promising to uphold and implement all of Trump's abortion-related policies without his own pro-choice ideology getting in the way, then I think that's a really good thing. He's also talked about ending the direct-to-consumer advertising by pharmaceutical companies. We talked about this with Dr. Roger McFillin and maybe also Dr. Casey Means. We talked about that we are the only country, or one of the only countries, I think it's the only country, one of two countries. Oh, I see. RFK said that. One of two countries that does this direct to consumer advertising by pharmaceutical companies. That we've all seen the commercials from, about these medications that you consumer are supposed to then ask your doctor to take some kind of antidepressant or psoriasis medication. That is not typical. And then the doctors are sometimes financially incentivized to prescribe these medications to you. And then the networks that get those advertising dollars are then beholden to those advertisers, don't want to say anything that upsets their advertisers because that's how they make money. So that's where you get a situation like CNN pushing so hard for the COVID vax and also being sponsored by Pfizer. So you're not getting the information that you really need. You're not being told the truth. And that's not fair when it comes to the health of your body. RFK said we are one of only two countries in the world that allow pharmaceutical companies to advertise directly to consumers on television. Not surprisingly, Americans consume more pharmaceutical products than anyone else on the planet. The Wall Street Journal confirmed this, saying prescription drug brands accounted for 30.7% of ad minutes across evening news. That's huge. On ABC, CBS, CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and NBC last year through December 15th. So that's a conflict of interest right there. And you are in the crosshairs. So I think that would also be another positive change. So I think that he will probably get confirmed. There's going to be a lot of interesting moments that we'll talk about a little bit more tomorrow. If you were not upset, if you're someone on the left or even someone on the right who is not upset at all by the leadership of HHS last time, Xavier, Becerra, Richard, Rachel Levine, and you're so concerned about this, I promise you the last administration's HHS was far more dangerous to the health of our country, to the future of our country, to the moral fabric of our country than RFK will be. Now, maybe you think that there's a better pick that Trump could have chosen, but we don't have that right now. And we do know that he's someone who is going to champion transparency, and I think we should all appreciate that. Again, just a brief reminder of who the last head of the HHS was, Secretary Xavier Becerra. He had no prior experience in healthcare or public health. Zero. Okay. So again, people saying, well, RFK has never been a doctor. He's never been in medicine. Neither did Xavier Becerra. And I'll just remind you that his HHS reversed the Trump administration's Title X domestic gag rule, which had barred clinics, abortion clinics, from receiving federal funds from referring patients for abortions, and supported efforts to make medication abortion more accessible. We already told you the recommendations that he had for so-called trans children, and he was also the Attorney General of California that has made David Daleiden, the pro-life activist and journalist, his life a living hell. He was the guy after Kamala Harris that continued the prosecution campaign against David Daleiden, who simply revealed through his journalism that it looked like Planned Parenthood was engaging in a pay-for-play scheme involving baby body parts. I got a really brief update on David Daleiden that we can praise God for in just a second. I've got to tell you about our second sponsor first, and that is Good Ranchers. So thankful for Good Ranchers. We eat their meat almost every night. It's all-American meat from all-American farms and ranches. You actually know exactly where you're getting your meat from. Seafood, better than organic chicken, pre-marinated, not pre-marinated, craft beef, all different cuts of steak. We eat it all in the Stuckey household, and we really love it. Christian, conservative, America, God-loving company that aligns with your values. Plus, it makes your life easier, shows up at your front door every month on dry ice. You don't have to go into the grocery store, worry about inflation, worry about where the meat comes from. Just rely on Good Ranchers. Right now, when you subscribe, you use my code Allie, you'll get a free add-on in your box every month. So you could choose, for example, ground beef or any other kind of meat, and they will add that on for free to your box every month for the next year. Plus, you can get $25 off with my code. Go to goodranchers.com/Allie, code Allie. Again, the shift in power is just amazing. Praise God for this. California recently agreed to drop all charges against David Daleiden and Sandra Merritt following years of legal battles over the pro-life activists' release of undercover videos showing abortion providers discussing partial birth abortions. That's illegal, and the selling of aborted babies' body parts. On Monday, the Center for Medical Progress, that is David Daleiden's pro-life group, announced that he had reached a plea agreement with the California Attorney General's office. The two activists will make a no contest plea in which they will receive no jail time, no fines, no admission of wrongdoing, and no probation. Oh, that's so exciting. I know that their lawyers are thrilled about this. They explained that their no contest plea will be entered into judgment as a misdemeanor for 6 to 12 months and then converted to a not guilty plea, dismissed and expunged. So just praise God for that. Again, Xavier Becerra played a huge role in trying to put him in prison for holding Planned Parenthood accountable. Neither he nor Kamala Harris investigated Planned Parenthood, a huge donor to both of their campaigns, even though it looked like they were performing illegal abortions and, again, selling body parts, which is actually illegal. So it's just amazing that Trump taking office, showing right away that I'm not messing around here, that has shifted things for people like Dr. Eithan Haim and for David Daleiden, even just indirectly, knowing that there is a change of power at, for example, the DOJ. And I don't know exactly what went on behind the scenes or what the threats were from Trump's DOJ to these states, basically holding these people hostage for doing the right thing. I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but I guarantee you this would not have happened if Kamala Harris had won. So again, just praise God. So much mercy being shown right now that I am just so grateful for. That doesn't mean we don't have a lot of work to do, because we do. Let's watch these confirmations over the next couple days. There's a lot that we'll be able to learn. But that's all we have time for today. We'll be back tomorrow.